Hello, thank you for joining us this afternoon. We are so happy to have you. My name is Andrea Gonzalez and I work for Trellis Strategies. We're here today talking about student re-engagement strategies, effective ways to plan and connect with students. We're going to have some wonderful conversation with administrators from 3 different campuses. Okay. I am happy to kick us off, and I'll hand it over to Steve Smith with Trellis Strategies, and he'll be leading the discussion today.
Okay, thank you very much, and welcome everybody to our webinar this morning or this afternoon, wherever you are, and thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Steve Smith, and I am the Director of Higher Education Services at Trellis and Trellis Strategies. And at Trellis, we have a 40-year history of helping people succeed in higher education. And our work, most of you are familiar with, is our research, our consulting, and our direct student services through our Project Success program, all of which is designed to help students start school, stay in school, return to school, which is what we're talking about today, and graduate. Graduation is the goal. So I am pleased today, we're going to be talking about a topic that is extremely important, which is how to re-engage the student that started college but didn't finish college. We have 3 experts, all representing one of the schools in our Project Success program. Dr. Ronda Westry of Alabama State University, Dr. Tamika Duplessis of Delgado Community College, and Brandy McLelland of Texas A&M San Antonio. Now I'm going to end the presentation for a second. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speakers today, so you get to know a little bit more about them and their credentials and their own background in higher education. So let me start first of all with Dr. Ronda Westry. She's Assistant Vice President of Student Affairs, Student Success at Alabama State University, which is in Montgomery, Alabama. It's a state university and historically Black college and university with a very, very rich history. She's been working in higher ed for over 20 years, and she's worked at a bunch of different places, community colleges, predominantly white institutions, and now the famous Alabama State University in Montgomery. She is a graduate, bachelor's degree at Spelman College, which is a Project Success institution, and she did her graduate work at master's and PhD, Auburn University Montgomery, and Auburn University main campus. She's a first-generation student herself, so this matters to her, helping people succeed in college. And in her role today, she really works hard on counseling, teaching, student and program development, helping students succeed. Brandy McLelland, also over 20 years in higher ed, is in charge of enrollment management at Texas A&M University in San Antonio. She oversees admissions, financial aid, communications, in the registrar's office. She's got a huge responsibility of helping students make their journey from the start to the finish through college. Now, Brandy worked before coming to Texas A&M. She worked in the California state system in a number of various roles, similar to Dr. Westry. She is super passionate about helping the underrepresented student find that path. It gets them from the start line to the finish line. She has her bachelor's degree, Utah State University, and her graduate work, University of Utah. Dr. Tamika Duplessis, Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs at Delgado Community College. She has a unique background as a scientific medical science researcher, and she's done lots and lots of work in this molecular and cellular biology. So she has a real passion for helping students succeed in STEM programs, but she helps students succeed in all programs through her role as Associate Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, because she has to deal with those basic needs, promoting and designing programs for first-generation students, single mothers, all the things that go into running a big city community college. She's there for that. She is a native of New Orleans, Louisiana, where she went to college at Xavier University of Louisiana, and she got her graduate work and PhD at Tulane University School of Medicine. So our team today is really, really special and really going to give us some extremely good insights into what we're going to be talking about. today. So with that, I want to talk a little bit about what we are really here to revisit, which is the idea of helping students come back who didn't finish college. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about numbers. This is national, but not everyone graduates, but it's a lot of people who don't graduate. It's over a third of students who start don't finish. And where does that leave us today? Over 4 million Americans who have not graduated. They started college, they have some credits, but they didn't finish. Okay, it's a big problem. Okay, and guess what? The new student population that we so much rely on in our country, which is, so many of our schools are built to recruit the high school student, get the new student to come in the door, new high school students. Well, guess what? The high school student population is going down. It's declining just for demographics, birth rate, lower numbers of high school students are coming in. So this is an issue because, all our schools, we have dorm rooms, we have classrooms, we have faculty, we're built for students. But if we don't have the traditional students coming in, what are we going to do about that? Well, here's one thing we can do about it. Look at this. There are more students out there who started college and didn't finish, prior existing customers, you could say, than there are all the high school student graduates combined. It's a big number of people out there who started with us but didn't finish, So I'm going to tell you more about what we know about those students, and then we're going to hear from each institution about how they have re-engaged this important population. But here's what we do at Trellis. We do a lot of research and technical assistance to help institutions with this issue. We do surveys. We've done many re-engagement surveys. What this means is students who stop. Why did you stop? Do you want to come back? What's going on? We do that, provide information to the college or university about their students. We will also, kind of like your institutional research office, but we will do it for you. We can take your school data and decide these are the students who are staying and these are the students who are not staying. What's going on here, so you can put a targeted strategy at that. We'll also look at your national student clearinghouse patterns. Are they leaving you and going somewhere else? Are they leaving and going nowhere? Because then it lets you know what's going on with these students. And also, we will also tell you what is the kind of the workforce connection to your students. Are the programs that you're offering related to the jobs that are in that community? And if they're not, that may be something to think about in terms of, the students, they don't want just a degree for a degree. They want that degree to get them a better job. If the jobs are not there, if the connection's not there, that may be a reason, okay? So we do have this toolkit. We'll send it around to you. And of course, at the end, I'll give you my contact. You can get it from us. This is our Project Reconnect, which is our recovering students program, Project Reconnect toolkit to help you work through on your own. And with our assistance, of course, we'll help lead you through it. How do we think about this issue with students and how do we get them back? It's on our website, but I will also attach it to anyone who wants it following this web. Okay, so what do we know about them? We've done a lot of work reaching out to students on behalf of schools that we work with and studying these schools. Let me tell you, students do want to come back. Not all of them, but enough of them that it matters. For 3 semesters, we did work with the students, colleges and Project Success, reached out to about 70,000 students at 20 colleges and got over 4,000 of them to come back to school, averaging about 6%, but some schools much higher. And we'll talk about what it takes to be in that much higher range where more of the students we call come back. But students do want to come back. In 3 semesters, we help colleges get over 4,000 students back to school, including the 3 institutions we're going to talk to today. Alabama State has done work with us on helping understand their population. Delgado has done work, both helping understand their population and the direct outreach where we do texting and calling to help the school get started on outreach, and so is Texas A&M San Antonio. We've worked with all 3 of these schools in both research and direct outreach with students. So here's what we've learned in our many surveys of students. First of all, alarming, students silently leave. I know we have counselors, we have financial aid counselor, the academic counselors, we have people who are eager to talk to students, but the students either don't know it or they're scared or they're whatever, they're leaving without talking to someone. And that's a problem because we all know that if we gave a talk to them, we could have come up with a solution. But they leave silently. So that's on us. We got to deal with that issue. And you know what? Here's the thing about not most of them are good. Almost most of them want to come back. So they didn't leave with this idea that I'm gone forever. In their minds, I'm not quitting. I'm just, I've got one of these problems. This is the problems that people tell us that they have. Personal finance shouldn't be a surprise. Now, this adds up to more than 100% because people have multiple of these issues. Compounding. Those of you who work in an institution, it's not just one thing. It's finances and I've got children I'm taking care of. Or it's my financial aid ran out and I'm dealing with academics. It's multiple things, and so this is an issue that we see. Students are working. This is another issue. So all of the above. But the reality of it is these are issues that we know if they talk to us about, we might be able to help them solve before quitting, and or we might pave the way back. Okay, so paving the way back. Once they've left, you saw our numbers, 44% of them actually want to come back. What do we do about it? Okay, so you got to think about this. You got to think about this in your institution. We're going to hear advice from 3 institutions that have thought about this. And what do you do? First of all, you got to identify which students you want to invite to come back. Now, I know there's going to be thousands of them, but maybe not all of them are, the best outreach, because you definitely don't want to outreach to someone and say, come back. And when they come back, you say, no, you can't come back. They need to be able to come back. So you got to identify, are they really a candidate? And then how do we get them back in the door? Just sending them back through the regular admission process may not work because that admission process is designed for that new student. This student has got prior credits, maybe they changed their degree plan, and they owe some money. They still have the children daycare transportation problems they had when they left. So the regular admission process may not be for that. How do we identify them? Trellis, we will text them and call them for you to get the ball rolling. That's one way to do it, but how are we going to talk to them and say, it's, time, come on back? Believe me, a lot of them are just waiting for that invitation. How do we make it? How do we monitor? It would be great to say they're coming back with all those prior problems have disappeared, but no, they haven't. They still have the same problem they had when they were here before. So we got to keep our eye on them. And then we got to assess our own process. Is it working? Is it not working? If it's not working, what do we do about it? All right. So we're going to hear from 3 unique institutions: Alabama State, Urban, Montgomery, Alabama, Historically Black College and University, 3,800 students, Delgado Community College, New Orleans, big, 12,300 students, Texas A&M San Antonio, Urban State University, 8,000 students. Each of our institutional experts is going to tell us, what are the challenges, what are the successes, and what is their advice to the rest of us on how to approach this. And we will start with Alabama State University, Dr. Ronda Westry. Dr. Westry, welcome to the program.
Hey, well, welcome, Steve. And I just have to start off by saying thank you. You are our family. And what you had on the screen with all of the support you have given Alabama State University was really an understatement. And I'd like to talk about that today. But on behalf of our 15th president, President Quentin T. Ross Jr., and our fearless Vice President of Student Affairs Enrollment Management, Dr. Melinda Swoop, we bring you greetings from the capital city, Montgomery, Alabama. So just to expound a little bit about my role as the Assistant Vice President of Student Success, I actually started in 2017 as the Director of Retention. And then we all know what happened 3 years later in 2020, and that changed everything for us as it changed the world, right? So in 2020, I was very fortunate, very blessed to be given the opportunity to serve as the interim assistant vice president. But in that transition, what I really like is that they divided, because student affairs, enrollment management, as we all know, is a very huge division. So they divided our division into smaller departments. And I was fortunate to be able to lead 5 different units. That really was part of my background in the 20 years that I was working in higher education. And so all of the units, which I named student success units, are units like our first year experience program, academic labs, academic advisement for first year students, accessibilities, veterans affairs, and university college. So when that transition happened, I really got involved with making sure, being that my background was the director of retention, but making sure, as Steve has mentioned, that the students who stopped out wanted to enroll. So when I was asked the question, what were some of your challenges with working with stop out students? Well, we can't start working with challenges until we understand why they left in the first place. And as Steve mentioned, they've been working with us for quite a while, but this survey actually started in spring of 2019, and keep that in context because that was prior to the pandemic. And going back to the national surveys or the national results, our results were no different. So our students, as you see here, the top 3 are financial reasons, to include SAP, institutional services, which I really want to expound upon that, because I look at it from a different lens than just the services that we provide. And then, of course, family and personal reasons, which again, when you think about when this was, when students were surveyed, and those were our students who exited the university prior to completing their degree, you can imagine that that issue was compounded after the pandemic. So we can go to the next one. Okay, so keep in mind, again, the top 3 reasons back in 2019, spring of 2019, when Trellis reached out to us to do this survey. So the top reasons, again, financial reasons, institutional services, and then personal family issues. Well, with that, the first strategy that we wanted to implement, and it's just so ironic that Brian Ashton at the time came to our campus. We invited him to our campus for our annual Spring Faculty Staff Institute, because the first strategy to addressing student enrollment retention, you have to let other people know. And I am famous whenever I do Faculty Staff Institute, and I do quite a few when I do the general session, because I'm the director of retention / AVP over student success. I have to remind my colleagues that retention is everybody's business. Enrollment is everybody's business. Yes, we're called Student Affairs Enrollment Management, but it truly is everybody's business. So you cannot have a plan unless you make everyone aware, because all of us are stakeholders in getting our students back on campus. So in the spring of 2020, Brian Ashton did our presentation with the data that were collected by Trellis to inform our institution of those challenges. And then I also went on to speak about the challenges and how we can address those challenges. From that, and that happened, so the pandemic really hit us hard, I want to say in March, April, right? And that's when institutions had to pivot to online and all kinds of things were happening. But we immediately knew if we were already having problems before this pandemic, we're really going to have problems now. So we immediately, under the direction of President Ross, he wanted us to put together a retention task force, and we worked with other external partners to do that. Over the years, that task force has evolved to what we now call the Strategic Enrollment Council, which includes not just your student support centers or your student support offices that are usually housed in student affairs, but it also included our colleagues in academic affairs, because again, we have to work together in order to be able to implement some of the strategies, and we need to hear from each other, right? We need to hear about faculty challenges inside the classroom. They needed to hear about our challenges with financial aid, with just financial resources. So Along with that, and this is where we, after all the years we've been working with all of our partners, we finally are seeing the fruit of our labor. But sometimes we feel like, everybody's at us, everybody's trying to help you, trying to help you to bolster your enrollment, and it becomes overwhelming. But what I've learned is Trellis was a great, that's why I said you all are understated with the support that you have provided with us, not just with the surveys that you have done for us, but also the texting, the calling, really supporting our efforts. But we took your efforts, our efforts, along with other people, along with other external partners' efforts, and we were able to reach out to students based on the conversations that we had with our Strategic Enrollment Council. Now, one of the gives that were provided to us, we were a benefactor going back to one of the reasons, the number one reason why students struggle with returning or staying in school is the financial wellness, okay? So it's not just like Steve mentioned, it's not just not having, because students never have enough money, right? But it was also dealing with SAP. But I am a proponent of prevention. So when we were offered the financial wellness survey, of course, we participate in that every year, but we were also offered during that time around 2019, 2020, the iGrad courses. And so happened we were writing for our QEP. So I wrote a white paper to make sure that we were going to include the iGrad courses, which is that financial literacy course, in our first year experience course, along with, and Steve, you really just sing to my heart when you were talking about, students come to school for careers, and that, that happens to be my research. So along with the financial iGrad literacy courses, I was also able to implement that whole major to career component in our first year experience course, which we're still using as of today, and we are in our 5th year of the QEP. Also, too, Steve said it as well. You just can't bring them back and say, okay, you came back. Okay, let's move on to somebody else. No, you have to have an office and a person dedicated to what I like to say, catching those students. Now, the Academic Center for Educational Success, what we call ACES, that was always my office as the director of retention. But going back to my background, working with non-traditional age students for 10 years at PWI, I understood the challenges that those students have. And plus two, one of our strategic goals, our university strategic goals, is to engage more in the recruitment of and the retention of those non-traditional age students. So I created another sub-office in the ACES office called OWL, and it's not my acronym that I came up with, I borrowed it from somebody else, but OWL stands for Older, Wiser Learners. And those students who are beyond the age of the traditional age of most of our students, and especially those students who, became parents along the way, their family dynamics changed, I wanted to make sure I had a dedicated person that person referred to. I mean, we have a very intricate system when it comes to stop out students and how we work with stop out students. And a lot of that has to do with our next partner that I'll talk about in a few minutes. But having a dedicated office to work with those students, make sure that they are pointed in the right direction. And I promise you, Steve, it's as if you read my notes when you said, really, students, and I've heard this and I've seen it written in notes, students really do appreciate when people reach out and talk to them. I hear it all the time. Thank you just for reaching out to me and being concerned about, not just getting me back, but helping me to stay back, which brings me to another strategy that we use. Now, we use this with students who are served through ACES, and I didn't really expound on what ACES does. ACES serves students who are highly at risk. In other words, these students are on academic and/or SAP probation. But the president, knowing the impact that had on our, what we call the ACES students, he requested that now all students be monitored and tracked through our progress early alert system. And then another strategy going back to a dedicated office and our intricate process to onboard stop outs. We were very fortunate. Again, President Ross again brokered another partnership with Education Advancement and the Thurgood Marshall College Fund to be benefactors of the Inside Track Success Coaching, which we are in our second year. And so they're working with us on two groups. And we are one of 14 HBCUs that's part of this transformation project, but we are on year 2 working with two different groups. One is our what we call the retention cohort, and that's our first year cohort, making sure that those students are retained, because as you know, that's how retention is measured for IPEDS. But we also wanted to make sure that we were working with our stop out students. So again, I have a dedicated person going back to that to process once that student shows, and we do reach out to these students, and going back to what you said, Steve, we carefully chose the students who we wanted to be part of that cohort or campaign. And so once we reached out to them to give them a pathway back, that person is not only coached by the Inside Track person, but they are referred to the person that's over the stop out students. So that person helps that student and point that student in the right direction. And then part of that came out of, because we were looking at what are some challenges that some of our students have, we were charging them an admission fee to get readmitted. And so for those students who are part of that, we waived that admission fee just to try to minimize some of the barriers. And then the last thing that came out of our understanding of the challenges is we worked with our state agency and got a small grant to implement the prior learning assessment credits.
Okay. And very good. And we've got, Dr. Westry, so much intentionality. I'm going to leave the data for our audience to take a look at when we send this out in a second. But I know you have an acronym that you wanted to leave us with. So tell us just a little, how do you keep track of all of this great work in one memorable way like that?
Okay, so I'm a big acronym person. So again, lessons learned, just strategy, plan your work, okay? But plan your work not in silos, plan your work campus-wide, motivated. Don't just plan the work and not work the plan. I have a lot of great ideas on the shelf. Well, I don't have a lot of great ideas because if I'm a planner, I'm gonna do it. But you know, people have a lot of great ideas on the shelf, but you have to have the courage and the people to implement those ideas, and then adaptable. And as we saw with the pandemic, we had to pivot. You know, I often talk about having the growth mindset. You know, be willing to change. You know, sometimes we as educators, we get stuck in our ways, but we have to be adaptable to all kinds of change. Don't abandon your plan, but do know that sometimes you have to tweak the plan. Resourceful. Who knew we had so many peer tutors on campus in this semester? And I say that to say, leverage resources on campus. And it just goes back to awareness. And then be together on this. Again, we may be on the student affairs side, your colleagues may be on the academic affairs side, but I say it all the time. I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful relationship with all of our academic deans, our provost office, because without them, we cannot do what we do.
Love it, love it, love it. Love the intentionality and love the message that it is a group effort. It is everybody who has to pitch in on this, as we all know. So let's talk about it. Is it similar, different? We're going to a very different type of institution, although are the students that different? Here's Delgado Community College, large urban community college, New Orleans. Dr. Duplessis, what's going on at Delgado?
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Westry, for everything that you guys are doing over in Alabama State. You guys are absolutely a model for institutions to follow in this space. And thank you so much for Trellis for the opportunity and all of the assistance that you provided Delgado Community College since our partnership has began. So on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Larissa Littleton-Stive, I bring you greetings from New Orleans, Louisiana. Delgado Community College is the oldest and largest community college in the state of Louisiana. Our fall enrollment was about 12,000 300 students. We're still enrolling students in our 12 and 8-week sessions. And on average, we service about 18 to 20,000 students annually. So Delgado Community College, as Steve has mentioned, is a little bit different. We're in the heart of New Orleans. So you can imagine we are a minority serving institution, but we're also a predominantly Black community college. So what they bring its own unique challenges, being right here in a major urban setting. So we began this work actually with a project that was sponsored by New America, and with technical support for student-ready strategies, where we looked at beginning with COVID-19, actually students who stopped out and why. We knew COVID-19 dealt a devastating blow to our student population, and what we saw was that our enrollment was really, really sluggish coming back, right? So with this work, we sought to understand first and foremost why students stopped out. What would it take for those students to come back? And while not included in this slide, we learned that it was more than finances. It was more than just tuition and fees. And that's when we really started to wrap our brains around what are our students experiencing and what would it truly take for them to come back. Our re-engagement work starts with students who were not enrolled in a college at least 2 years back. And so looking holistically at the data from that project and what we were seeing with students of that time when we delve deep into this work is that SAP often inhibits students from coming back. We understand that in order to come to college, students have to pay for college. And almost 67% of our students are Pell eligible and are receiving federal financial aid. So if you think about SAP status and how important that is for our students, so making sure that and acknowledging that student SAP status, especially those who are what we call in statuses that are unfavorable. Those are the bad SAP, the denied SAP statuses, all of those statuses that inhibit students from accessing that aid is truly, truly a challenge. So number one, when we talked previously about making sure that you identify the students who are great candidates for this process, inviting them back and then telling them that you can't access aid is absolutely not acceptable. So making sure that you are very intentional about who those students are. Getting back to what they are facing, the realization that those social determinants of student success in and of themselves are barriers for not only students who have stopped out, but students who are actually going through the process and are continuously enrolled. So a plan to address those student basic needs for those students was extremely, extremely critical. And in one, acknowledging that it exists and in having the resources on campus to point them to once they re-engage with the college. The third challenge that we experienced was that our students have complicated past enrollments. Delgado Community College has an average age of 28 years old. So you can imagine from the time a student exited high school to where they are right now, factor in 1 or 2 or more stop-outs, which I'll talk about a little bit about later. Our students have complicated past enrollments. They've switched majors multiple times. Their degree time to completion is much, much longer. So acknowledging that path and giving them a clear path to completion when they come back is absolutely critical, and we noted that as a significant challenge when recruiting students back to the college. Next slide, please. So some of our lessons learned. Again, early identifying of those students. I think we went one forward. Let's go one back. In terms of our challenges. Next one. There we go. One more. Back that one. All right, so successes, right? So what we ended up doing is that we developed a cohort model where all of those students who are coming back for one particular semester are put into a cohort. This is not doable without a true case management system to be able to track these students, put milestones, alert them to their milestones, and when they are in danger of not meeting those milestones. So using a cohort model, we began re-enrolling our students and tracking those numbers. So before we began this cohort model, and again, when we launched this model, we was utilizing Trellis to do those initial conversations for us and then follow up by putting them in a cohort and doing the communication campaigns that followed. What we've learned there is that constant communication and liaison back and forth with these students were absolutely key. Before we began our cohort model, we were recruiting students back, but it was only at about 45 to 47%. Once we began cohorting them, tracking milestones, engaging them in communication campaigns, and putting together the plans for their path back, we saw that increase from 47% to about 60% of our returning applicants. This population was extremely, extremely important to us. When we're looking at our graduation rates, what we've noticed is that most of our graduates, the students who have come back successfully, have stopped out multiple times, not just once, but 2 times or more, averaging about 2.2 times. And we've learned that our graduates, about 1/3 of them at one point were unretained. So our students along their journey, their normal journey to our college, are stopping out multiple times. So we have to be really, really intentional about how they leave us, when they leave us, and always stand at the ready to bring them back with the proper resources involved. Next slide, please. So lessons learned was there. We talked a little bit about personalized supports, right? So in addition to case management, making sure that we're linking students to the true resources that are needed on campus, identifying not only resources at the college, but community resources as well. So partnerships with our total community action, our local shelters and the like were really, really important to make sure that our students who are facing some of those student basic needs, like food insecurity, housing insecurity, childcare, or lack of thereof of childcare, was really, really, really important. One thing I hadn't talked about yet with this work is making sure that we talk to the students. Understanding their plight is extremely, extremely important. As professionals in higher ed, we think we know what our students are going through because we're doing our work and we're close to the work. But there's nothing like centering student perspectives to help guide and inform your work. So talking about regular focus groups, regular surveys, saying, I'm doing this work, but how am I doing as I do this work? And am I truly meeting your needs is extremely, extremely important. So I could not imagine doing this work going forward without centering my learners and learning from them as we move forward. Utilizing existing framework, especially as it relates to communication plans. If your college has CRMs and the like, creating unique spaces for these students and specific unique drip campaigns that are important to those students are key. Communicating key dates, when things are due, how things are due, and the like are extremely, extremely important with this work.
Thank you, Dr. Duplessis. Now that cohort model, I mean, that is a big win. And you also talked about the ongoing assessment. Now, this is a scientist in you. You have to replicate the experiment, right? You can't just do it once. So you have to be able to say, you know, what's going on here and look at that. And that is one thing that we also say, that don't just, you know, continue to investigate, is the strategy I'm using working or not? So, but this is critical. 2.2 times coming in and out of the college. This means that this is a regular part of life at Delgado, is coming and going, and so be it. That's the way it works. Fantastic perspective. Okay, we're going to now move to another institution, very different again. Urban, compared to the other two institutions, a relatively new institution. Texas A&M University at San Antonio, and Brandy McLelland is the Vice President of Enrollment Management. Brandy, what's going on at A&M San Antonio?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I think that's the place to start. We are a young institution. We're like 15 years old. And so I think when our system actually decided, the A&M system, to really look at this issue, we at first, I think, were kind of like, well, we're young. We don't have a lot of students in this space. But ultimately, when we really started looking not only at our students who had stopped out, but just the number of students in San Antonio that had some college and no degree, it really became an important issue for us, and really trying to, as a young institution, be a place where students want to come and complete their degree. It gave us some defining space, I think, in helping those students complete. So we did hit some barriers, and one of the biggest ones for us is, and we've talked about this before, those financial barriers. Being a young institution, we don't have a lot of additional resources. We don't have a lot of scholarships. We're still building, and I think 76% of our students are Pell eligible students. So we have a lot of students that need support. So we have really had to figure out some creative ways to help students come back with those financial issues, address those financial issues. And we've made some headway in that space, not as much as I would like, but we're really looking at this place to be a place of investment too, looking at some outside community support to help us. It's an incredibly important piece because, like Steve said, if the students can't come back, if there's a barrier in their way, then we shouldn't be reaching out. And we have a number of students that have hit this financial barrier, and we want to be able to reach out to them, get them back, and help them complete their degree. For us also, one of the challenges that we found was also that often students had gone back into the community, they went back to work, and maybe their contact information had changed. Maybe they had some different way of connecting. We were having a hard time finding them. And COVID didn't help that process in any. We lost a number of students, and there just was some communication barriers. So we're going to talk a little bit about, but we've gotten really creative in ways that we can and find students, because our contact information for our step out students is not always valid. But also when we talk about the larger community, the number of students in San Antonio that have some college but no degree, finding them, connecting them to a degree plan, even if they didn't start with us, to help them get those credentials is super important. And so looking at lots of different places in the community where we can connect. My favorite story here is connecting with like students whose parents who have had some college but no degree, and bringing them back in. And we've had actually some success in that space, looking in different places when we're maybe outreaching to different populations, and then looking broader at that family and those support staff or support people for those students, and connecting them also back to those degrees has been a really big win for us. Work-life obligation is always a challenge. We have a older population as well. And again, when students go back out in the community to work, it's hard to get them back and balance all of the obligations they have. Students may lack that support. Again, we serve a number of first generation students. And so often once they've left maybe a high school or a community college, they don't necessarily have all of the support pieces they need to know that process. And so, and re-enrolling can be complex. So for our campus, again, as a young campus, it was a lot of people, a lot of processes, and none of it was connected. So this is a really big barrier for us, having to sort of come back and try to look at it from a holistic space. Next slide. So that's really what we did. We got a committee together. We did some work with the system, with Trellis. We got a committee together and really started to chip away at what things, really low-hanging fruit, things that we could do to quickly sort of turn the way we were handling these students and really put our best foot forward. And so that's where we started. We started with our communication. We started with our materials. We didn't really have anything that spoke to the returning student. None of our website had any information about returning students. None of our materials had information. And so we didn't have a communication plan. So we spent a lot of time really working on those things, updating our website, putting some materials together. We also looked at some other places where just maybe things stood in the way. One of those was like our new student orientation program. Those students were sort of made to complete that entire program again, even though they've already been here. So looking at ways that we could minimize that and not spend so much time in that space. We also created, we don't have a whole office, we created a position, and I think it's unique in the sense that our position exists not on the retention side, but on the admissions side. And we balance that and work with our success coaches. But we felt it was important as these students started to build that relationship with admissions. That was sort of the outreach piece, that we didn't want them to lose that relationship. We know it's super important. They need to be able to go to someone and ask questions, someone that they know, someone that has the information they need. So our admissions counselor who works with this population supports them, recruits them, outreaches to them, works with Trellis to get that going and supports them all the way through that process. But then that person also checks in with them a couple of times a semester. Do you need anything? Are you having any struggles? And that person is then connecting them with the resources on campus. So if they are having a hard time getting into advising, or if they're having some basic needs that need to be met, that admissions person is not necessarily serving those needs, but that she's connecting them to those resources. So they feel like they always have a person that they can come back to, someone that's always paying attention, making sure that they're continuing making progress. One of the small things that we were able to do this time, as it relates to balances, is just looking at those costs. How do I get someone to re-enroll if they have an outstanding balance? We've created a new process on campus that allows those students, before they couldn't sign up with a payment plan, or they had to take care of their whole balance before they could come back. So we've put some things in place that allow us to let them re-enroll as we make a plan for them to sort of pay that balance back. So it's not a deterrent from them coming and looking at that. And last, this is a big win for our campus as a whole, because again, we're young, we're 15 years. We didn't have, and we still don't have, a lot of resources. And so as we start to expand those resources, we literally got some childcare support this past year. So we're super excited about that. That's a huge win for our returning students. Some basic needs in terms of food pantry, some other things. These are, while I know other institutions have a lot of these resources maybe ongoing, for us, it's building up those new resources, making sure we're supporting, and also, as my colleagues have said before, connecting with the community, not just on campus, but getting those students connected with the community. We've been able to really put some efforts and some space, and that really took getting a group together on campus that was paying attention to the student population. It couldn't just happen in enrollment management. We had to look for these resources across campus. We had to find the right people across campus that had this knowledge, had the support, had the connection to resources, and put them together so that we could support these students and give them that piece. We can go to the next slide. I won't talk too much about the data. The big piece is that what we really saw is just a connection to students throughout the funnel process. So as we were trying to bring them back, we saw them increase in terms of how we were getting applications, how we were getting admitted, all of that connection piece, really looking at the front end side of that from an enrollment perspective. All of those things really increased for us. We had students completing at a higher rate. We had less outstanding items, all of the positive pieces. And because we had that connection, because we feel like we had that communication really strong, that we felt like those students were able to move through the process in the funnel much quicker than we had seen in the past, which is a huge win for us. So lessons learned, our number one lesson is it takes a campus. It takes a lot of resources. It's not one division, one department, one person's job to support these students. It doesn't work. So you need that big campus approach. Simplifying the process, again, putting that communication piece together. We have a checklist for these students so they can literally go through step by step and get through that re-enrollment process. We removed all the barriers that we could out of that process. So that's been a huge one for us. That's where we've seen the most success, is really those students completing that process, getting them support before, during, and after the process. Another thing that we've not hit on a lot, but something that was a win for us, is just looking at different flexible learning options. This population was one of the reasons that we came up with, and the academic folks worked with them to come up with a general studies degree. We've seen a number of these students actually complete using credit that they had amassed at different places through that general studies degree. So that's been a huge win for us as well, making sure that sometimes they don't need a degree in a specific area, but just that degree is advancing their career. Also, of course, looking at different online and flexible options. And then my biggest thing I say all the time is we got to be creative. We've got to meet the students where they are. We got to find them where they are. We've got to be creative, adaptable, I think. Dr. Westry said, same thing. We've got to adapt. We've got to find them and support them where they need that support. We've got to connect with them and know what they need. And when we do that, and when we really have some mechanisms to do that, we're better at meeting their needs.
Thank you so much, Ms. McLelland, for that. And once again, similar to something I've heard in a number of places, but I really heard it, one thing that just as you went through your material, you've continually looked for ways to make it easy on people to do this, like having that specific admission officer that specializes in this, so that continuity, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whenever you're coming back to enroll, the person, you're going to get consistency. And that as well as that, I mean, a learning option too. How many students, they've got credits from here, there, everywhere. They just want to be done. They want a degree. So make it easy on them. Say, we got a degree for you. I know you started in this and you ended up over there. We're going to let you finish. Great stuff. All right. We want to hear from everybody here. We want to hear your questions. I do want to introduce my colleague, Dr. Nishan Jones, who is on this morning. Now, Dr. Nishan Jones, earlier I showed you let me go back and just remind everybody, we got this available to you. I want to show everybody, we have our Project Reconnect toolkit that we can help you walk through, who are you identifying, what are your steps, everything. Dr. Nishan Jones can visit your campus, help you walk through it, help you identify it, and then let us help you do some of the work of actually reaching out and getting the ball started with your student recovery. Okay, we do have 10 minutes to take questions from you about the things that our panelists talked about today. So please, using the chat function of the Zoom, please let us know what questions or observations you have for our panelists to expand or expound more on the lessons learned, the successes, the challenges, the variables that they have laid out about recovering students who started but didn't finish. Okay, let's hear your questions. And while we're waiting for questions of any type, I would like to just invite, I did mention my colleague, Dr. Nishan Jones. Dr. Jones, did you have anything you wanted to share yourself after having, worked with all three institutions yourself also, but just having.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to thank all who have participated, Dr. Westry, Dr. Brandy, McLelland, and Duplessis, Dr. Duplessis. You all really took hold of some of the advice and the consulting that we offered. And I just want to let everyone here know that our services are available. The cohort model works. And Brandy knows that, we kind of went through this and moved through some things. And she did say, we're a young school. We don't have, going through that process and allowing us to do that assessment is very important. And I just want to reiterate what Dr. Duplessis was stating in regards to that outreach to the community and that 2.2 of their coming back. We have to meet the students where they are, right? And so if you have a team, if it's a team of 1, if it's a team of 2, if it's a team of 10, and Brandy knows that's how we started, and Dr. Westry had said it too, we are here to help you move it and push it forward. So thank you for this time. Thank you all for sitting on the panel, and we look forward to doing this work with you all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jones. And please let us know how we can help you get started on this. Okay, audience questions, please put them in the chat. But I have one, which is all of you, while we're waiting for the audience questions, all of you mentioned this needs to be a collaborative type of thing. It's not just the admissions office. Now, granted, you got to project manage it. Ms. McLelland talked about, I have someone in admissions who's there. So that's kind of a project manager, but by no means, I don't take it, Brandy, that person's solely responsible for the experience, right? And by no means, they're just kind of project managing. But we talked about the campus community. What is a little part of the campus maybe that isn't part of student affairs, it's not part of enrollment management, it's just a different part of the campus that can have an impact on students leaving or coming back that may be not part of the normal regular conversation? Do you even have an example of that about, maybe that little area that's off to the side that they're having an outsized impact and they're not part of the normal conversation? Brandy, I see you coming off camera. Who is it?
That's a great question. Actually, our number one place we started was with the bursar's office. And so it's often an area that's forgotten, but it's a place that students show up and talk about their financial needs. And they don't feel, they're not financial aid. They don't give money, right? They just take money. And so there was a lot of conversations that were happening in that space, or a lot of, students wanted to have conversations, but they weren't getting any good information. And so they were really just getting told, pay your bill or get out. And I mean, to be bluntly about it. And so I think it was a place that we really started. We actually got our bursar onto the team, and that was a huge win for us because I think they started to see their role in that. I don't think they had really taken responsibility for that. And that's a positive thing because once that happened, we started to have a lot of conversations. Started with how those students are received, but also bigger conversations about customer service and just how information is put on bills, things like that. So that was a huge win for us, an office that maybe didn't necessarily see their role in this in the beginning, but really has become a great partner and a really great proponent of telling other people why we need resources and how we can invest to support students. So, and they have very different conversations with students now, which is great.
Fantastic example, but you had to bring them into the conversation. They didn't know they were in the conversation, right? And so now we had to, Dr. Westry, so let me just say, Alabama State, you said your president, Quentin Ross, put together a campus-wide committee on this issue. Now, plug, October 17th, we're having another webinar featuring the campus-wide customer service plan that Alabama State University wrote to bring everybody into the conversation. It's on October 17th. You're going to get more information about it, but preview. But Dr. Westry, what's that little area of the campus that no one thinks about that has an outsized influence on student, stopping out or coming back that, you discovered as you brought everyone to the table?
We don't often think, and I'm a former TRIO professional, sometimes we don't think about our student support services office that serves first-gen students. They are a great asset, and our office falls under academic affairs. But again, we don't think in terms, because, once we get the deans and the provosts, we don't think in terms of other individual offices that sometimes stand alone because, they're a federal program, even though we know what they do, but they have been very instrumental in leveraging, going back to resources. We have to work together in identifying and working resources that are on campus to help us to achieve our goal. And it's funny you mentioned customer service, Steve, because going back to institutional services as the problem really does sometimes boil down to customer service, and not so much how we treat our stakeholders, but sometimes our systems are customer issues. And so that's some of the things that we are working on and will continue to work on within our university, because we realize that those are customer service issues as well.
Very good. Thank you, Dr. Westry. Yeah, our systems can stand in the way. We got to make it easy on people, but how are we not? You got to constantly assess. You talked about assessment a lot, Dr. Duplessis. You talked about ongoing things. Are there any places that you found, this little office isn't part of the conversation, but they are now?
So if anybody knows me, I'm a writer. So when you wrote the question, the first thing I wrote down on my notes was the bursar's office. So we've learned that too, because when there's anything financial, right, most students go to the bursar's office and they will ask questions of that team. And we all know, being in higher ed, that team literally is that transactional group. So how do we tool that group to be able to answer questions and point students in the right direction? But I did want to bring up another group. For us, it was our communications and marketing. So within student affairs, we have a recruitment and outreach team that focuses on communications to enrolled students, applicants, and prospects. What we weren't doing necessarily is leveraging the expertise from our Marcoms team. And so bringing them into the conversation, having us develop that student profile and do all of the analytics around all of our communications and those tools that group brings to the institution as a whole, how can we bring some of those resources that we already have on campus into this project and into the fold? So our Marcoms team is now a part of the group, as well as our bursar's office.
Fantastic. So, again, they don't know what they don't know until you say you're part of this conversation, and that's what you did. And so that's why, the intentionality of this work is so important. You have to think in terms of what are we talking about, who's involved, all of that we saw today. And I will leave you with one more example. I heard last week, I was at the National Conference of Historically Black Colleges and Universities that is presented by the White House in Philadelphia. And there was a panel, and one college president told the audience that she, with a federal grant, fixed the school Wi-Fi. And that helped with the retention of the students, because the Wi-Fi was not reliable, and so it could be things, I'm not saying that that's a primary thing, but those little things can very much affect our students. Okay, we're at the top of the hour, so our program is really wrapping up. We will have this available to watch later. We do have our toolkit for helping students come back and the work that we can do. Let us know if we can help you. We can walk you through it. We can provide the toolkit to you. This is how you can get in touch with us. Of course, we'll follow up with this after we're done. I want to thank our 3 fantastic experts, Dr. Ronda Westry, Alabama State University, Dr. Tamika Duplessis, Delgado Community College, Ms. Brandy McLelland, Texas A&M San Antonio. Thank you so much for the work you do for students and for sharing your knowledge with the rest of us. And thank you, all of you, for participating today.
We do have one question in the chat. I'm not quite sure if we have time for it. Sorry. Do we?
It's just, it refers to, have you seen to help students with SAP or prior balances? So if anyone wants to comment on that, we can comment on that.
I know in my presentation, I dealt a little bit with SAP, but in terms of successful incentives, so one thing that we've done were micro scholarships around SAP. If anyone's familiar with micro scholarships, they're very, very small scholarships designed for students to complete certain tasks, and those funds go towards their student accounts or whatever balance that they have. So one of the things we learned is that micro scholarships, while they're small in dollar amount, you can spread it out over a lot of students and get them to check off the box. We talked about milestones. They would hit those milestones with those small things. How did we choose who received them? It was literally first come, first serve for students who were in unfavorable SAP conditions. What we've learned is that you don't have to have a whole lot of money to motivate students to do things that we already know will help them be successful. It doesn't take a lot of money to do so. So that's just kind of perspectives from my end.
Very good. Thank you for that food for thought. Small money, big impact. So fantastic. Great. Thank you very much to everyone for your insights and for joining us today. And again, October 17th, we're going to be meeting with the Alabama State University on their campus-wide fantastic customer service plan. Come, and we hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.
And Steve, we have been pushing that gold standard. It is awesome. And I hate that you weren't able to come, but I heard you had hurt your hand during that time. But yeah, we are so excited about in fact, I mentioned to one of my colleagues, I said, I'm using the gold standard that we were taught to the faculty staff. Don't just send people everywhere all over campus.
I talked to both Dr. Ross and Dr. Petty at the meeting, and they told me it's going great. So we're going to let the world know about it. So
I am interested in hearing more about that. So
yeah,
good job.
It is a wonderful, full, we helped kind of get this conversation started, but the college really did the heavy lifting, obviously. And it's just a beautiful campus-wide customer service initiative that we're going to do on the next webinar. So,
yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, team. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Jones, I love you. she holds me to the task. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, y'all take care. Thank you so much. This was a pleasure.